Welcome to Module 2, Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. So at the end of the session, you will be able to define what UDL means and apply its core principles to your own classes and locate relevant resources for further learning about UDL. UDL is a this is something that's taken from architecture. And the idea is, as opposed to when we see something like stairs that have there's another option, right? You can go around the corner. If you can't navigate stairs, there's another option and you can take an elevator, but it's not built in, right? Accessibility is an add-on as opposed to something that is built in from the beginning. So universal design is something that makes, as you can see from this example here with these ramps, it is built right into the staircase. It's not meant to be something that is an additional tack on later. And so when we think about what that means for learning, this is not offering accommodations as a side thing when a student tells you that they need some sort of accommodations. This is having that built into the class from the beginning instead of coming up with an alternate assignment, letting students have different ways that they can engage with the content, different ways that they can show their proficiency, so that accessibility is something that is just kind of baked in from the beginning. So we are not talking about learning styles. That is something that has more or less been debunked. The idea here, it's not that some people are only visual learners or are only, they need the physicality, something like that, right? But the idea of variability. So we want everyone to have equal opportunities to learn and succeed. So what this means in practice is that we're going to have multiple means of engagement, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of representation. And we'll look at some examples of what in practice this actually looks like. And you'll see there's a few, some videos and some examples here from different teaching centers that can give you some examples of courses that have done this in a wide variety of different ways. So our basic tenets of UDL are anticipating the needs of a diverse student body and designing with them in mind. So thinking about any student who might show up in your classroom before you design the course. Thinking about students who might be hearing impaired, students who have mental health concerns, students who might have unexpected family or caretaking needs that come up in the course of the semester. So the next tenet here is setting clear and transparent goals and expectations. So this is really communicating well what you are expecting. Assuming that students, we're going to talk about this in the hidden curriculum. Ellen's going to talk a little bit about the hidden curriculum, but being as transparent and as upfront as possible, letting students know what you expect. Don't assume that they know things, and don't assume that if you want to change something at the last minute, that all students will be able to adjust on the fly. Multiple options for engagement, expression, and assessment. Not everyone is going to enjoy showing their proficiency in the same way, and not everyone is going to be able to do their best work in the same way. That doesn't mean that you should eliminate a certain type of assessment entirely. If one of the key learning outcomes of your course is that you want students to become proficient in delivering an oral argument, you can't eliminate that just for students who might be nervous about, delivering an oral argument. So there are going to be ways, depending on the course, there are going to be ways that you're going to adjust these different things. But providing multiple options is a great way to make your class more accessible. And that's both in terms of how they engage in class. So maybe students who have a hard time speaking up in discussion, they're a little bit more hesitant. Having ways that maybe they can lead a class discussion about something. So there's a little bit more structure there to help them get engaged. Maybe they can provide an outline or make an infographic that represents something that was going on in class. So they're contributing to the class conversation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this kind of one-size-fits-all model of engagement. If you look at the slides, this is a live link here about UDL. UDL principles are based on the three-network model of learning that take into account the variability of all learners. And this is the part that's really important, including learners who were formerly relegated to the margins of our educational system, but now are recognized as part of the predictable spectrum of variation. So, people who in the past were oftentimes put into other classes or sort of special needs, things like that, where people were not part of the central experience of the class, people who are marginalized. We want to design our classes in such a way that that's not happening, that the class is accessible to everyone across a huge spectrum of mental and physical abilities and the variability that is part of our student body. So there is also a link if you want to look at this more closely, but this sort of lays out the basic ideas behind universal design for learning. So it talks about, you can see going this way, access, build, and internalize. So the ways that, and this is going to work with multiple means of engagement, the why of learning, the recognition networks, the what of learning, and the strategic networks that are the how of learning. And so there's a lot of details here. I would really recommend that you dig in a little bit. And you'll see kind of the goals here, right? Purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed. I want to really emphasize that nothing about universal design for learning is lowering our expectation. A lot of times people act like this is bringing down the rigor or what we expect from students. And that is not the case. This is providing more ways of getting to the end that we want. But we are still very much, the expectations can be the same. The level of student proficiency is going to be the same. It's just going to be a different way of assessing and building towards that goal. Just a little bit around accessibility. There are a lot of laws that you can look for more here, the more legal info. The law is a floor, not a ceiling, but there is a minimum requirement that, and I hope all of us are very much on board with making classes accessible. But if you are getting pushback at your institution, there are a lot of laws that require accessibility. That requires accessibility around mental health, around physical health, and this gives you some backing. But I want to remind you, this is the floor. This is not the ceiling. This is the minimum that you are legally required to do. You can always, and I hope we will all be on board with this idea, we can always go above and beyond and be more accommodating than the minimum standards set by the law. Again, just the idea, if we are making technology inaccessible to people, that is illegal. You cannot do that. That is discrimination. So finding ways to make sure that your use of all of the technologies that are going into teaching and learning, make sure that they are accessible. And I don't mean to hold the law over us as a threat here, but we see this a lot and this is just an example. This is publicly available. I'm not trying to specifically go after anyone here, but this was something that happened last year. There was an article about students who quote unquote game the system by self-diagnosing as psychologically unwell. And this quite prominent philosopher said, I recognize a lot in this article. I was shocked when I first read in a student's notes that they should not be asked questions in seminars by me. Now I'm used to it. If it's any consolation, I ignore it. Don't do this. It is, like I said, it is unethical, and in many cases, it is illegal. So I cannot stress enough. I don't want this to be a very negative vibe coming across here, but I cannot stress enough how much it is incumbent on us as instructors, as ethical instructors, as compassionate instructors, to design our courses with all of our students, giving them all and chance to succeed at the highest level. So when you're thinking about what this means, center the voices of and resources made by the people most impacted. If we're thinking about, there's a great group in classics, Crip Antiquity, they have a pedagogy guide. chronically academic as well, right? These are things that have been largely made by or in consultation with the people who are most affected. Center those voices and make sure that you are taking seriously the concerns that people are raising about places where their needs have not been met by the educational system. And then just a little bit. So this is Understanding UDL. There's a whole website here that can give you a ton of information, and we'll share that link out. But I just want to give you, so this gives you a lot of ideas about if you go into their media and tech. This is the UDL on campus website. And it gives you examples for each of these elements of what it would mean to provide multiple means of engagement. So video, great. Allow, having video as a resource. Instructors can create videos. Students can create videos. That is a way that you can have lots of good engagement, but it should not be the only option. Allow students to create video as an active way to demonstrate their understanding, particularly for those who experience challenges in writing or live presentation. Video is a great option for people who want to have a little bit more control over they can re-record if they don't feel like it's where they want it to be. It can also, for students, if it's not a writing-based course, I have really moved away from thinking that formal academic writing is the only way to assess my students' knowledge. They can show their mastery of the content in a variety of different ways. And so video, great. I've had students who do audio recordings, right? If we went down to the audio section here, we would see some audio recording options. I'm happy to have a student do a reading reflection where they just talk to me for 5 or 10 minutes in person over a recorded medium, but thinking about what our real outcome is. And if it's not a writing intensive course, writing doesn't have to be the only means of engagement that you offer. And then again, means of representation, right? The use of video in the classroom is going to, we can get the students involved there. It can recruit and sustain interest for a topic. So both video as a way for people to engage with the content and for us to communicate the content. So anyway, I would encourage you to go look around. There's a lot of great information here for each of these different types of media or technology, what these different means and means of engagement, means of representation might look like. So we have 2 different journaling prompts. So first of all, how have you already been applying the principles of UDL in your classes? Where do you have room to improve? And these are, just as a reminder, the 3 main principles. So you can share that in the Discord or just kind of write it in a journal, keep it for your own reflection purposes. But I think sometimes it's really great being able to go back to an earlier stage in my teaching and see the ways that I have changed things. Like I said, I've gotten away from the formal academic essay as the way of assessing my student understanding or synthesis of course content. So where have you been doing these kinds of things, and where could you do more? And then an alternate, you can do both. You can do one, you can do the other, you can do neither. But an alternate option here, explore these UDL and course design resources and pick one or more of the topics and discuss them in greater detail. How might you adjust your course policies or design? The UDL syllabus is a great way to think about, and we'll be getting into a lot of this more in other modules, but there are some really good places where you can do a little bit more of a deep dive and just think about these different questions in greater detail. So look forward to hearing what you all have to say and what thoughts you have about universal design for learning and your course design as we're going forward here.